Good morning, or is it good evening for you?
Good evening and good morning to you. Good to see you again.
Well, brother, it's good to see you. We talked many times when I was in Spain, but a lot has happened since then. I
Yes.
really enjoyed your book. I'm hoping that everybody out there will get a copy of it. There's a lot of history in here.
Yeah.
People, that don't know you need to understand that you were on the ground floor of the Hells Angels becoming a force to reckon with in Denmark and Europe at large. But this is your story, and I want you to tell
I,
it.
I can explain a little bit about how I made that book. It's my first biography, George, and I published it first in 1985. So it's actually a very old book, but in Scandinavia, it's like a cult book. Everybody got it. All the youngsters buy it and all the bikers
Now,
and it's the story of
there,
yeah.
there's an interesting aspect of this because you had just assassinated Mackerel, and you were on the run.
Yes, I actually in 1984 I killed the leader of another club called the Bullshit, and after that, of course, I went on the run for a while. And one of my good friends, he was a filmmaker. He said to me, "Well, if you're bored, why don't you write a story? You always tell so good stories, Jonke." I have to explain that the book is called Jonke, My Life. There's an a Danish but everybody else, like you and everybody, all my foreign friends and brothers, whatever, they call me Jonke. So if you call me Jonke, that's fine for me. But we choose Jonke because that is my real name, Jonke. But that's a Danish type of language. But I wrote it in 1984, and in 1985 we published it. At the time of the publishing, I was on the run living in Canada, where I lived actually more than 3 years when I was on the run. The book is about the first 24 years of my life.
Let me ask you this. I know you went on the run. You did a lot of the work on the manuscript in Paris, and then somehow you got it to a publisher. And what he got was raw. Uh,
Well, he got 993 handwritten pages, and
right.
normally you don't. And publishing company, they don't want handwritten
No, they don't.
manuscripts. Only written down, of course. At that time, it was a typewriter. Later on, it became a computer. But they liked the manuscript so much, so they took it in, and it has been a bestseller in Denmark and Sweden and Norway for many years.
Now,
And now,
let me ask you this. I understand that the publisher had a crisis of conscience, in a sense. He was thinking, should I publish this book? Should I not publish this book? This guy's a wanted man. Did you have to reason with him? Did you interact with him? How did you
so
get the book published?
well, I actually finished it in Paris, and then I sent it back to my friend, the film producer, and he gave it to this publishing company. But this publishing company was actually it was a bit of a left-wing publishing company called Time Changes, and they didn't show what's worried about it, but they kept it secret. They kept it secret for a long time when it was written and fixed by, of course, we had to fix it and put it in print and everything. And when it was ready, they made a big editorial or whatever you call it about it. And the cops were like watching them and following them around in the city, my publisher and the journalist who helped fixing the manuscript. But in the beginning, some of the bookstores, they didn't know if they wanted to put it up on the disc or keep it under the disc until people came in and asked for it. But everything got very relaxed because it so simply sold so many copies. Like it was 12,000 one week, 12,000 the next week, 2 months, 50,000. It really became a bestseller in Denmark.
Let me ask you this. Okay, we're at the point now when mackerel's gone, and
Yes.
uh, let's go back a little bit and let's talk about how these conflicts started between these various clubs and name the clubs. And ultimately, you guys became Hell's Angels.
Yes.
And I know you guys got the bullshit to disband. They
Yeah.
kind of threw in the towel. They said, we don't want no more. So
Yeah.
could you kind of go over that for me?
Well, it was a very different time, of course. It was like the rocker time, we call it in Denmark. We were called rockers in Denmark, and they still use that term in Denmark and Sweden and Germany, not in very many other countries. The word biker didn't really catch on in Denmark because of the police and the medias. But at this time, back in the days, I was like only 17 years old when I joined what we call the Union. And that was four clubs from Copenhagen. That was Galloping Goose, Nomads, Dirty Angels, and Iron Skulls. We formed a union. And after some time, we were already at war with the bullshits. We had a conflict with these guys. And when we kind of started joining the Hells Angels, we finally grew up. The funny thing apart was that finally we start behaving. Before that, we were dirty. We was rebels without a cause. Kind of like what happened in the 50s and the 60s, maybe in the United States.
Okay,
Denmark is always 10, 15 years behind United States. That's how it works, especially in this environment.
that's true.
And we had that conflict, and we didn't know much about Hell's Angels. We just read about it. We heard some stories, a lot of strange stories, and then we found out that we wanted to join the Hell's Angels. When we joined the Hells Angels when we first became hangarounds and later prospects, the conflict with the bullshit kind of stopped. But most clubs in Denmark, they went with us. Like 95% of the clubs, they went with us. They wanted the biker lifestyle instead of the rocker times, the rocker days or what we call it. But the bullshits, they kept staying in the past, and that kind of gave a conflict between two different environments: the rocker period environment and the biker lifestyle. And that's why
Let me
things.
ask you this. How many leaders in bullshit had you guys gone through? Because I think Mackerel was the last leader, and then somebody else took over, and then that's when they said we're disbanding.
Yeah, Mackerel was the second last leader. When I came home from Canada in 1988, after being on the run for about 4 years, I actually went to a lawyer and I went to the police over there, and they didn't arrest me. They just told me to come to the airport. And I went to the airport and went back home. And 2 months later, the bullshit, they threw in the towel and said, that's enough, we had enough. But after I left Denmark, about 6 other bullshit members was killed. So there
Right.
was only one president after Macron. Yeah. So this club kind of stopped existing. Yeah.
Now, so what year is it now?
We are in 1988. I went on the
Okay.
run in 1984.
Now, I remember uh, when did you go to prison?
I went to prison in 1988. I got 16 years. That was kind of the normal sentence for one murder in Denmark at the time. Today they changed it. Now it's life sentence for one murder in Denmark, killing in Denmark. And but it was part of a conflict, so it was just what was happening. But
Now,
at that time,
let me. I think this would really interest the listeners and viewers out there. Tell us about when you were attacked. I'm kind of jumping ahead and then I'm going to go back, but I find it very interesting that
yeah,
you were attacked in prison. You had a
yeah.
grenade thrown in your cell. You had
Yes.
they machine gunned the door. So go ahead and tell that story.
Yeah. Well, that was like in the end of my sentence. After about, I think, about seven years in jail, I was sent to a minimum security prison. And the security wasn't very high, top level there, of course, and it wasn't too difficult to get in. About three guys, they broke into the living room at my unit, and they took the window out, and silence. There wasn't much of cameras at that time, and they sneaked in and went to the what you call it, the hallway where my cell was, and they threw a hand grenade in front of my door, which was kind of stupid because a hand grenade is not made for opening doors. It's made
No.
for do a lot of damage in a war. But it blew up and they couldn't hardly see anything. And then I was sleeping actually in front of the door, and they emptied a machine gun with about 25 shots and a 357 5 shots through the door. And three of the shots hit me. Eight went into my refrigerator, and eight into my bed, and the rest spreading all over. Like the doctors were saying, Jesus, you are the most lucky man in the world. And I remember one of the Canadian brothers, he looked at me when I met him over there and said, Jesus, Jonke, till the clip runs out, he said to me. But this time I was on the wrong end of the machine gun. So I tried both. But some people said to me, well, that's nasty that they break into the jail and shoot you in the middle of the night. And I said, no, actually, I thought it was kind of smart because that's if you can do it, you also have to take what's coming the other way if that's the way it is, and that's how I looked at it.
Well, it was certainly ballsy. There's no
Yes,
getting around that. And
and I survived good, and I'm alive and kicking, so that's good.
now, so tell us about the book coming out. It's very popular. You're in prison and you go on a book tour.
Yes, that was a little bit later because in Denmark you have to do I think it's 1/3 of your punishment before you get allowed out on furloughs. And
Because I
first I
remember, I think you and I talked on the phone one time, and
yeah,
you said, "I gotta hang up, George. It's time for me to leave." You were going out on a furlough, uh,
yes,
which
I
I
had
thought was
20,
really
20
interesting.
yeah, 25 times with the prison guard I had to go out because it was me. Because when I went out on furloughs, I had lectures for different schools and different leaches, all kind of places I went to, and the politicians were quite mad about it. And also, I had a lot to do about my book signing. I started writing more books when I came home from Canada. First, I did two novels, and then I did my second life, which I will also publish on Amazon sooner or later. We start with the first one. I know it's an old book, but it's really selling well in Denmark and Sweden and Norway still.
And
So the
and
last,
you and I were on a
yeah,
TV show together. Uh,
yes, that was in Stockholm, I think, in Sweden, wasn't it?
yeah,
That when you came back down from Finland, I was thrown out. They wouldn't let me into Finland. They had a
right.
kind of like in the weekend stop. And what happened was that most people could come in because at that time the Danish police didn't have an agreement with Europol. So the
Right.
cops said to us, don't tell them about any crimes. So when I sit there in the room when it's finally my turn, they ask me, so have you ever committed crimes? And I'm not much of a liar. I have to admit that. I always hate it. I don't even like lying to a cop, to be honest. But of course, it's necessary sometimes in the old days. But I'm a
Yes, it
very
is.
fan. So when this Finnish cops, you have to realize normally they don't understand Danish and Swedish people, but some of them speak Swedish. And one of the cops, he asked me by the border in Helsinki, he say, so have you committed any crimes? And say, I'm not going to answer that question. And that should have been enough, except that the other cop said, hey, Jürgen, I read all your books, so goodbye. So he
They
knew
kicked
I
you
was a
out.
killer and whatever.
Right.
I was kicked right out of Finland. I can go there today, but I couldn't go that weekend. But
Now,
we met in Sweden, I remember.
yeah,
First in Stockholm, and then we made that interview. And then later we went down to that beautiful clubhouse in Gothenburg.
right. Yeah. And
We were out jogging together. I
that's right.
remember.
Yeah, every morning I went out jogging there. That's back in my old days before I had my hip replacement, so I was still
Yeah,
jogging. But I wanted to talk about the problem with bullshit gets settled.
yeah,
Now the banditos out of Texas want to expand in Europe.
yeah.
And I remember, and I don't remember the brother's name, but I was up in Oakland. And this is the first time I heard this. One of the brothers, he had long blonde hair. I'm I'm thinking I can't remember his name. And he tells me, he goes, George, there's a problem brewing in Europe, in Scandinavian countries. He said that the banditos are looking at our former enemies, the bullshit club. And can you talk a
No,
little
no,
bit?
Yeah, but it wasn't bullshit. Bullshit was gone.
They were
No,
gone.
this was another club. And to be honest, they were actually friends of us. Like I've seen many conflicts and wars being made up by our own stupidity. And
Right.
actually, it was also some from our club who provoked the new banditos. If it wasn't, I would say, if it wasn't for a few people in our own club and in the banditos also, and for the police. I think this is the second conflict I'm in. That's what it was called, the Great Nordic Biker War. That came
Correct.
later. That's in another one of my biographies, which will be published later, called I'm Still Alive. That's my fourth
Right.
biography. But what happens is the police, they want a conflict in Denmark. So they push the new banditos and they push Hells Angels, and we end up in a wild conflict, which was very wild because there were rocket launchers and bombs and everything used, and which scared the population, the people, of course.
Let me ask you this. I was told that the weapons that were in the possession of each club really came from these militia outposts or whatever you want to call them, that you guys were breaking into these outposts and they were full of automatic weapons, rockets, guns, and whatnot. Can you talk to that a little bit?
Well, I can't. Well, the thing was, when this conflict started, to be honest, it was the banditos who had the rockets. And some of them had apparently broken in, and the police knew that they could actually remove some of the rockets, but they didn't
I know
because
that.
part of the police wanted. That's my opinion. They wanted this war, and and you see, it's. I mean, the banditos thought that the Hells Angels was just a club of old men sitting and relaxing in downtown Copenhagen, but they found out we weren't. But they, I mean, they're still here. But that war shouldn't have been there, if you ask me. I'm kind of the same tune as you. The club should get along
Yeah.
because the only thing that happens is that the cops is sitting there, and then they can start banning. And that's what we have actually right now in Denmark. We have a case right now. They're trying to ban banditos in Denmark.
And tell us a little bit about that case. Like they been losing these cases? Are they being
Well,
successful?
we only had one case before in Denmark, and that was a gang called LTF, like a gang mostly with foreigners, young kids, coming into our country and having social things, whatever. But this is the first time they tried with a motorcycle club, and I'm a politician now too,
Yeah, I want to
so.
talk about that later.
Yeah, but my party is against this because we think it's a slippery slope that you start undermining our constitution. Because the Danish constitution say very clear that you have the right to get together and that you have the freedom of speech. So what they're trying to do now is they're trying to ban the banditas, telling they're criminal organization and they are run by violence, whatever. I don't agree with that. I didn't agree with it when I was in the club, and I'm not a two-faced fucker. I still have the same opinion in the party because it's not worth it. Because the illegal things in the club is already illegal. So what
Right.
this is about is actually they're banning the good things in the club, like the people who party. See, here I am, riding their bikes, doing the bikes. Those are the people they're trying to ban now, not the criminals, because they're already banned because it's illegal to be a
It's
criminal.
illegal. Yeah, there are already laws for that.
Yeah,
My
correct.
thought has always been go after the guys breaking the law.
Yes.
The guys partying and riding their bikes and they're there for the
Alone.
brotherhood. Leave them alone, And my thought is, we get accused a lot in the United States of being a criminal organization. I don't see the Hells Angels as a criminal organization, but there are criminals within the organization,
Oh, yeah.
and
And,
the
and, and
record
to be
speaks.
honest, I'm not trying to defend banditos or Hells Angels. It's not my job. I'm just being honest because nothing would be more easy. I see a lot of guys leaving the club and they end up being like, spokesperson for this and that, and dishing everything. I mean, I'm sick and tired how the club evolved in Denmark, my own club. I don't like that. And I don't get along with them, of course. But I have lots of friends there still. I don't talk to them because you know how it is. When you're
Yeah.
out, you're out. So I don't speak with them. guys, I'm still not a two-faced fucker. I speak up my mind about what's right and what's wrong. And for the country, it's better that the police, they stick to policing and the politicians, they stick to making laws.
Tell us a little bit about your party, and then after that, I want to back up a little bit. I want to talk about. I think there's a lot of conflict in these clubs. It's like there's generation gaps within the club. There's a lot of ego driven personalities that they're creating their own problems. But tell us about your political party.
Well, the political party is called Stabil Demokrati. That means in English, stable democracy. We are bragging about we have a democracy. So are you in the United States. I don't like the American democracy. There's something wrong, but there's definitely also something wrong in Denmark. So what we think, if Denmark was a computer, I would say there's something wrong with the steering system. You know what I mean?
Right.
The system it's corrupt, and that's the politicians, and they get worse and worse. They get more and more arrogant. And we are trying to fix that. There's a lot of problem in different political areas in Denmark. I mean, our military is fucked up, and our police is fucked up. The social system, the hospitals, everything is fucked up. Can you still see me now? Something showed up on my screen.
Yeah, I see you perfectly.
That's good. It's saying, okay, there's something here. Wait a minute. I'll do like this. Oh, good. I can see you again. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, sometimes they
So
act up a little bit.
our party is actually the only party in Denmark who goes against the system. So we're gonna have a very hard time, and we already feel that, they don't like us too much because we are speaking the truth. We make politics out of experience, know-how, and common sense. Those three things is very important for us. And also we are a citizen party. So we have citizens who sit and make the politics together with me.
Now, as you develop this party, are you at some point in time going to try to get voted into a position so you can represent your contingency, or
Yes.
that's where
No,
you're going?
I'm not going to go for to become the prime minister of Denmark because I know what I want to. I want to get Denmark together. And even though if we play that I had 60% of the votes, the last 40% would be in shock if I was going to be the prime minister. So what I'm going to do the next 3-4 years together with the people in my party, we're going to find a very good man or woman who can represent the party as a prime minister if we came to that. You understand?
Right.
I'm gonna stay out here watching that nobody gets out of line because I'm good at that. You know me, I'm a very
I
honest
know.
person. A very honest person, and it's very important to me that people don't come to make money in our party. We want to save Denmark. I wouldn't be here. I would rather sit on a balcony with a red wine and a joint to relax. And I spend almost all my money on this project, but I believe that we maybe have a chance to save Denmark and maybe even more than that.
Do you feel that the outlaw motorcycle world is a reflection of society at large? Like you were talking about dishonest politicians, misinterpreting the Constitution, and whatnot. You know, I know you're an honest guy. I know you've always told it like it was. I tried to do the same thing, and it's just like when I quit the club initially, and then of course people in the club said, "No, we kicked him out. He's an informant. He's this. He's that." Are you guys experiencing the same thing in Europe? I know there was a lot of
Yes.
misinformation about you that kind of mirrored how they were representing my departure from the club. Because I know you're a stand-up guy. I know you
Yeah.
didn't break any rules or do anything wrong, but yet both of us are here out bad.
Yeah.
So,
I
what's your
stood
comment?
I stood up for a person who wasn't really my friend. Like I said, some people said to me, "You shouldn't stand up for this guy," and I said, "Hey, I'm not gonna vote anybody out who haven't done anything just because some people is after his things." That's what it was. So I was actually thrown out by a coup, and I also remember when they threw you out. I remember I was still in the club for several years, and at
Right?
that time I was one of the most influential Hells Angels in the world. I mean, for about 10 years, even their
Absolutely. Yeah.
Even the Americans came to world meetings and said, we just got to get Jonke with us, then we'll win the discussion. The good thing for me is I can argue with the Americans and Canadians, because I stayed 3.5 years in Canada.
Right.
So I know the language, and I can get into a heavy discussion, and then I have a bit of a head on top of my body. But the thing was that I heard about you two. Somebody said, "Oh, he's a snitch," and I said, "Okay, who did he put to jail?" I asked them, and they couldn't answer me. So I knew it was bullshit. And I heard
Yeah.
the same thing about nobody would tell that to my face, but I heard that somebody was talking about me like that too. But to the day, it's more than 4 years ago, I was thrown out of the club, and nobody have ever told me why I was thrown out because they know it was fucked up. And most people didn't like it. But what happened in Denmark, also like in some places in the States, it became a power show. I'm not into a power show. For me, the power lies in what you do for whatever you work with. That's your job. What you do. That gives you the power. In my world, not because you have a big head or you have a silver spoon in your mouth or whatever. But
Well,
when
you know,
you asked me, George, sorry, you asked me about if reflects society. You could say that because in our parliament in Denmark now, we have more of these people who left their party and jumped to another party and back to a third party than ever before. And that's the same thing with the clubs in Denmark. In the old days, 15 years ago, nobody went to another club when they left or was out. But now, because of the internet too, 2 hours after they're thrown out, these dummies, I call them, they're in another club. I would never join another club. I was a
no,
Hells Angels, and that's
yeah, I have the same thoughts, you know, and you're right. Uh, as far as being in the club, you're either in or you're out. And it's kind of apparent to me, it doesn't matter if you're out good or if you're out bad. When you're out, you're out. You're no longer part of it. If you think that somehow you're going to get some sort of benefit from hanging out with the club and whatnot, you're not going to do that. You're either in or you're out. And, the new norm is everybody's out bad. All the clubs in the United States, I talked to a lot of guys I've known over the years, and, most of them are out bad. As soon as they leave the club, they're out bad. And I don't know. It was very controversial. I know that I'm not supposed to talk with people, but I do talk with people in the club, and I'm not going to identify them so anybody will get in trouble. But I know there was a lot of people really pissed off because there was no good reason why you were. It was basically a coup.
yeah.
You, didn't you go to a meeting and
Well,
kind of get set up?
yeah, well, yeah, I got set up to a meeting. It happened in Sweden. I knew it was going to happen. We knew 2, 3 days before somebody warned us, and I could have stayed away, whatever. And to tell you the truth, the moment when they did that setup, then they had quite a lot of people in there yelling and screaming, and the other half of the room was like in shock. When I was escorted out of that room after 40 years of working hard for the club, and they told me that I couldn't defend myself to the bullshit they just read up for a statement, then I thought, what the fuck am I doing here? I'm way too clever to be here. So they suspended me, but I already said to myself when I walked out that room, I'm done with this bullshit. So as soon as I got home and gave my things back, my pads or whatever it was, then I stopped. They tried to call me once, and I said, "Hey, you can. We have like a one or two guys who look after the out person." And I
Right.
said to him, "You can look after yourself, and you can call yourself. You're never gonna talk with me again." And he said to me, "Then you are pissing on the club." And I said, "No, I'm not pissing on the club. I'm pissing on all the people who threw me out like that." And
You
that
know,
was it.
I kind of had the same experience when they called me and said, "Hey, your status has changed. You're out bad now." Uh, I basically said, "Well, then I got nothing to say to you guys anymore, and don't approach me, and I won't approach you." But
Yeah, exactly
you
the
know,
same thing I said.
yeah, and there's a lot of people in the United States that were really pissed off about what happened to you. I think one member, I'm not going to mention his name, but I know one member, a 40 or almost a 50-year member, he got kicked out of the club for continuing to support you.
Yeah, he said, "I known Jonke for 30 years, and I'm not gonna stop talking with him." And then
Exactly.
got
Yeah.
him thrown out too. I mean, he was actually the I think the fourth oldest member of Hell's Angels in the whole world, and
Yes.
had been in the club for more than 50 years, and they still threw him up. So he was thrown out on a lie too, and that
Yeah.
was really bad. I once in a while I talk with him because actually I'm very happy to be out because that makes everything clear. I mean, I wouldn't even have it in another way. I like to be out, because it's then everything is clean cut.
Well,
That,
Jonke, you put your time in just like I put my time in. I'm very happy with where I'm at in my life. You know, I would I go back? Yeah, maybe if I was 25 years old again, I go back to where it all started from. But I'm happy with where I am. Where do
yeah.
you think this whole outlaw culture is going? Are we going to be ultimately legislated out of existence? Is that
Yeah,
is that what's going to happen?
I think they're doing their best around the world. The problem is really that the police and the media, as they work together like campaign journalism, they're poisoning the public opinion against these clubs. And I mean, also the clubs are also a little bit to blame because they don't react when they have some really shitty cases. I think the club could react more when there's shitty cases. There was the things about somebody dealing drugs. I tried to stop that, and I know that was a tough one. But for example, I tried to say, okay, we can't stop it like that, but we can stop new guys from coming in dealing drugs, for example, because at this time. I know it was a free spirit clubs and the club didn't interfere in members' own life or whatever they did, but it was hurting the club. And that's why I thought, let's try and go down this road. But not very many people wanted to listen to that. And when I see the new people coming into the club in Denmark, it's almost desperate when I see these new people joining. It's not very good material anymore. And that's also because the police have made these campaigns together with the medias to make the clubs look more bad than they are. So I can't see. I think the whole outlaw thing is going down, and we're gonna have more gangs. And I tell you, I don't know how it is in your country about that. I know you have a lot of gangs over there, but in Denmark they are not gonna be happy for the gangs because the big clubs keep the gangs down. And they know, one club know three gangs here, the other club know two. So they keep it a little bit down. And if those big clubs, it's funny because my politic is to get China and Russia and America to work together for a better world. If those three countries work together, there wouldn't be any war anymore on the planet because it's all about proxy wars for the big three countries. And it's the same thing with the clubs in Denmark. We have three big clubs. If they got along, they could stop most of the trouble
Yeah,
and conflict.
I agree with you. In Ventura, when we were at our strongest point, we had a lot of influence with all the street gangs. They would listen to us. We could call meetings at the clubhouse. Do you think at some point in time the politicians, the lawmakers are going to go, gee, maybe we should have left these clubs intact? Is this stuff going to get out of hand? Are the police going to be able to control?
It's a little bit funny because my vice chairman in the party, he's an ex-cop. He's been a military man for 12 years and 20 years in the police force. And he was sick and tired of being pushed out against the motorcycle clubs because they never did any harm to them. But they had their fights with these gangs. And he said that it's the worst thing the police ever started was to hunting down the clubs. Of course, the crime is crime. So we say the same in our party. We don't want to ban you, but if you commit crimes, you go into jail and maybe even for a long time. That's how it has to be because you can't let a society just float because then you get the same thing that you have in Mexico, with 365,000 deaths and cartels taking over here and there. But
have,
so you
have
got to
the
do
have the prison sentences gotten longer?
in Denmark, yeah.
Yeah.
You get the same thing for murder now in Denmark, and the same thing for drug dealing as you. In the old days, you could get 12, 14 years for massive drug dealings in Denmark. We have a lower sentence level in Denmark than in the States, but now it's 22, 24 years dealing drugs, the same as killing somebody, which I
Right.
think is a little bit stupid. But I think there are other ways to do these things. I think we could be much more smarter, and we're gonna try and do that with our politics also, of course.
How big is your party at the moment?
Well, the party is about, I think we're not that big. We have a couple of hundred members, and we have an inner circle of 30 people who makes the politics now. And then we have about 1,250 followers in the party. But we have a lot more people, I think, expanding around. We are growing up slowly. We also like a movement. We would actually like to spread this to all over the world, this party. And that's actually our plan.
The when I returned from Spain, I stopped in Denmark. I had a layover there, and to get on the plane, I had to show my passport, and they seem to have a very extensive system there. You know, I just look like some old man going back to the United States, but as soon as I gave my passport, I mean,
Yeah.
they just all lit up and came around. What do you think's going on there with immigration?
Well, immigration it's a problem in Denmark like many other places. You know, it's actually your wars and Israel's war who bring in a lot of immigrants to Denmark. But I
Right.
always say, as long as you send weapons, because we also have a bit of a weapons factories in Denmark, and I don't want to be part of the military industrial complex you have over there. That's disgusting in my eyes. Actually, when I had my first talk with some of the soldiers who help us doing the defense politics, he looked up at me after 5 hours when I left, and he looked at me and said, "I think CIA is gonna start watching you one day, Jonke." He said to me with a smile,
Well, I wouldn't be surprised.
and he was
You know,
just called.
it's interesting.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
George, he was just called now by the top brass. They would like to talk with him because they heard that he made military politics with me, and that's disgusting because they should stay away from me because it's politics. I don't mind that they look after me for a little while, and check out that I'm not as like a spy for the club environment or something. That's fine. But we have a lot of intelligence services in Denmark here, and they work closely together with, for example, CIA, whatever. And I think they are the one who do all the damage to the world, not the citizens who want to try and make a political party.
Let me ask you this. Has there been any allegations? And this has happened to me. This is my personal experience. There was a rumor going around for a while that I was actually still in the club and that this was a front for me to be able to operate easier, you know, kind of a rouge, if you will.
There has been a little bit of it, but not yet. But we know it will come, but just a little bit. So we see, that resistance from the system, because we are anti-system. There's no parties in Denmark who's anti-system. They just follow the big brother United States and NATO and CIA, whatever they do, and we are dead against that. We want to stop that.
We've been covering a lot of ground. Let's get back to the book.
Yeah.
You know, I want everybody to get it. There's a lot of history in here, and I want you to talk about when the Second War picked up a little bit. That's when George Weggers. You remember George Weggers?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, but you have to remember that's not in that book. That's in one of the later books I'm gonna publish. You see,
Okay.
this is from the
Well,
Rotter
let's go
days.
back.
Yeah.
Let's stick with this book and let's go
Okay.
back.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the early days. I remember
Yes.
you guys had some fights in some of those bars.
Oh yeah. Every weekend. That was the life of those days. It didn't get very serious. We got into scraps everywhere. Half of the time we were on Fridays, Saturdays. We were sitting on the police station, waiting to get released. It was tough times for me personally. That was the days where I was a bit of a criminal. I never had a criminal mind. I'm not into this kind of shit. So when I went on the run to Canada, I kind of went like on a journey where I had time to think, George. So I kind of changed a lot. So my time before Canada was where we were really into fighting. We fought everybody. We fought the other clubs. We fought the karate clubs. We fought football clubs. Anything we could fight. sometimes people stopped up and say, who are you? If we were in a bar and we didn't have anything on, they asked us, who the fuck are you? We wouldn't stop for anything. We
Well,
weren't
let me
very
ask you
strong.
this. How did the
Yeah,
violence escalate? Because, I watched it here in the United States. I started writing in the mid 60s, and then I watched it slowly evolve into very violent things, when we got into it
yeah,
with the Mongols. How did
yeah.
it escalate from fists to knives and guns in Denmark?
Yeah, well, at first it didn't really escalate. First, the violence was just fighting. And then when we kind of joined and became Hangaround Club, Prospect Club to Hell's Angels World, the violence went actually down. We start saying, hey, don't touch anybody who haven't bothered you, stay away from the citizens. That was what we learned from Hell's Angels. And it was really funny because suddenly we were state enemies when we start behaving. But then these bigger fights, there was less, but they were worse because, like you said, then the knives came, and I think it's an evolution for human beings. It's not only in our environment; it's everywhere in the world. I
Right,
mean, in some ways, you can say the world has turned crazy now, but in those days, it was a lot of fist fights. Fighting and kicking, whatever, but it was still on a level where everybody got home and could eat their supper.
right,
I don't know. I think it was just an escalation, which is human, to be honest. And it's the same way it is in this environment. It's the same way in a lot of other environments, and that could be the hooligan environment, or it could be in the wars we see around the world now. But in this club, I mean, Denmark had a lot to do in those days because a lot of people in Europe they liked Denmark because we were tough, and we really stuck together. And we actually, from Denmark, we actually developed health things, especially up in the north. We got Norway with us, and suddenly there was a club in Sweden. They used to be raggers, which was car clubs, but they
right.
went to the States, a couple of the members, and had bought some Harleys. And then they really liked it, and then they came to and asked Denmark, "Can we join as hangarounds?" That was in the 90s, of
Now,
course. This book here, Jonke, My Life, it ends in about 84. So it's from 1960 to 1984. That's the old days. And I was having a bit of a discussion with my publisher. How should we start? It's a very old book, but it's really selling still in Scandinavia.
well,
So what
I
I'm
think
gonna
it's an important book. It is and
yes,
I urge the people here in the States. I get people ask me questions all the time, and you know, I remember the chronological order of things, but I wasn't there. So,
yeah,
you get the information second and third hand. This book just breaks it all down. It really
yeah.
gives you some insight. Now, when
You,
did you
you
guys
know,
patch over? Were you up in Switzerland? Was that at a Swiss run? I'm
Yeah, yeah. Well, it was not a Swiss one. We were at Swiss ones when we were hanging around in Prospect, but
right.
we actually became members in Switzerland.
That's
We
right.
went down, yeah, we went down to Switzerland, and then we went from Zurich, 150 kilometers out in the mountains. And at a mountain hotel, we partied for 3, 4. In the old days, the party was 3, 4 days. I
Sure.
can't party more than 3, 4 hours now, but that is how it was. In those days, you had not very many hangovers. You got along with a lot of party, and we had a great party there. And one night, it was New Year's evening. They called us up. I was actually there. There's nobody left in the club in Denmark anymore who was there. I was the last one there, and we
Right,
was called up to this meeting, and everybody was sitting watching us. There was members from all over Europe, and then there was some Canadian brothers. There weren't anybody from the States at this time. But they looked at us, and then suddenly they broke out in smiles and they yelled, "Welcome to the family." And
right,
that was a big thing for me, a big deal, because you have to remember I was probably the youngest member in the world when I became a member. I was 20 years old only.
right,
And I remember we had a big fight during our hang around prospect time with the Germans. We got into a big scrap on it through the night in the clubhouse in Denmark. And when they left in the morning, they were yelling at us, "Hey, the only one here who can join the club is your dog." Because we had a Rottweiler with patch on from Galloping Goose. and
Right.
it ran sideways because a cat got its eye. And that was the last thing they yelled at us, the German. But we got a letter from Hells Angels World 1 month later, and they said, "Okay, you can start becoming hang around in the club." So that's how it went. But it was
You think that was just a country rivalry between the Germans and the your country, or
no, we actually still had a lot of stupid members in our club when we started. There was about 65 of us, and well, half of the people were dead drunk, or a couple were in jail. So we were about maybe 30 guys fighting 14 German Hells Angels. We couldn't beat them, but they couldn't beat us either.
right,
And it was a really heavy fight we had. I remember I was actually at sometimes I was fighting two Germans in a room, and outside in the hallway somebody were fighting, and every time they hit the light switch because it was broken, there was like tape over it, and every time they hit this light switch the light went out in the room, so you had to get down because you couldn't see a damn thing.
right,
And then when the light came on again, we looked behind the stove. There was a stove, big stove in there in this office, and there's a member from the club at those old days. He's hiding behind. His name was Söffe. And both the Germans and me are looking at him. What the fuck is he doing hiding there? And he was thrown out the next days, and somebody wrote on the wall, Söffe's place. That's how it went on. It was really
right.
wild. The cops came in the middle of that fight too. They thought we were crazy because what is going on here? And the Germans right away
What
they
did the
said,
cops do?
well, they asked us to stand still or whatever, and we told them to fuck off. It was in the old days, it was different.
Right.
Today, the cops have almost come like military. But in
I'm
those days,
laughing
they were shocked.
because I'm laughing because in Ventura, like 1978, we were fighting another club
Yeah.
right on Main Street, and the cops pulled up, and like they didn't know what to do.
No.
And
Yeah.
so they let us fight.
Yeah, they didn't know what to do. It's because somebody had heard a shot. There was a couple of shots that night too, but it stopped. And I think it was a special thing, but it was actually because of stupid things. What they didn't like too much either, the Hell Saints, was that we had a club called Dirty Angels, and they said there's only one type of angels in the world. That's Hell's Angels. They said in our world. So
Right.
but it was a lot of fighting those days. It's the rough time or period of my life was these days before I went to Canada and get a little bit educated by thinking myself.
Look,
Yeah.
I want to give you the opportunity. Uh, okay, this book's out now. When do you anticipate the next book out?
Well, it's a little bit funny because I spent a lot of money getting this book translated, and I hope the translation is fine. I went through it myself after. I speak fairly good English, but I
Yes, you
couldn't.
do.
Yeah, but there's a lot of slang in it, George, so it was a little bit difficult for the translator. He's actually a Scottish guy. So I went through it and then it's done. But what we are trying to do now is trying to look into one of the other four biographies and get an AI translation. First of all, it's for free. And
Right.
second, it's very fast. So I think we'll do that. And if that works for the publishing company, I think we're going to publish them all one by one. And
One
then
by
you get
one.
the whole story up to our time.
Well, listen, we're going to wind this down. Is there anything you'd like to say to your followers? You got a lot of followers out there, Jonke. A lot of people support you. They
Yeah.
think you got a raw deal. I have people write me all the
Yeah.
time. Is there anything you'd like to
Yeah.
say to your public?
Well, I would say, I mean, stay tuned and keep up the good mood. That's the only thing you can do.
Right,
Sometimes, life hand you lemons, and like you say, make lemonade, like the people say. I think for me, it's always been my smile. I'm always in a good mood. Even when they threw me out, it took me 24 hours. Then I was on with something else.
right.
I write books. I have lectures. I'm doing very well. I travel and I still party a little bit. Uh, I
Not as
I'm
hard
not
as we
right.
used. We
What's
don't
that?
party as hard as we used to, though.
No, we can. I mean, in the old days it was 3 days and 3 hours hangovers. Now it's 3 hours party and 3 days hangovers. So,
Yeah,
but we
exactly.
still keep it. We still keep it strong. So
Well, listen. I think people are really going to enjoy this. I'm hoping you'll come back again when the next book comes out, even if
sure.
just come back on and give us an update. I know I'm going to get a lot of people that are going to ask questions, and I'll keep track of them. And maybe
Yes.
we'll get on here and we'll do like a Q&A with
Yeah.
your American audience out there. But I also have a lot of people from all over the
Yeah.
world, on my
Yes.
Patreon and on my YouTube
Yeah.
channel. But I want to thank
Yes.
you. I still consider you a brother. I
Thank
uh,
you. The same to
uh,
you.
I just, what can I say, man? I'll see you
Yeah.
when I see you.
Yes. And thank you for having me on,
Thank
George.
you for coming, Jonke. It's a real honor.
Pleasure.
I will see
Yeah.
you soon, brother.
Yeah.
Take
Take
care.
care.
Okay.
Take
Bye
care.
bye.